Marcus Thompson had worked at the Blackstone Mining Company for 15 years, but respect was something he had never earned from his crew. Standing barely 5 feet 6 inches tall with graying hair and thick glasses, he looked more like a librarian than someone who should be giving orders to hardened miners. The men under his supervision towered over him, their muscles built from years of hauling equipment and breaking rocks deep underground. Every morning when Marcus arrived at the mine site, he could hear the whispers and see the smirks. The workers called him Bookworm behind his back, making jokes about how he had gotten his position through paperwork rather than real mining experience. They were not entirely wrong. Marcus had studied geology in college and worked his way up through the office before being promoted to foreman. But he had never spent years underground like the men he now supervised. The mining crew was led by Big Jake Morrison, a mountain of a man who stood 6 feet 4 inches and weighed nearly 300 pounds. Jake had been mining since he was 18 and believed that leadership came from strength and intimidation, not from reading reports and following safety protocols. He openly questioned Marcus's decisions during team meetings, often crossing his massive arms and shaking his head when Marcus explained new procedures or safety requirements. "Listen here, college boy," Jake would say in front of the other workers. "We've been doing this job since before you knew what a pickaxe looked like. Maybe you should stick to your paperwork and let real miners handle the real work." The other men would chuckle and nod, enjoying the daily humiliation of their supposed leader. Marcus tried different approaches to win their respect. He studied mining techniques late into the night, memorizing equipment specifications and safety procedures. He brought coffee and donuts for the crew, hoping small gestures might warm their attitudes toward him. He even attempted to join their conversations about sports and local news, but his efforts only seemed to make things worse. The men saw his attempts at friendship as weakness, and their disrespect grew stronger each day. The situation reached a breaking point during a particularly difficult week in November. The mine had fallen behind schedule, and the company executives were pressuring Marcus to increase production. When he called a meeting to discuss working extra shifts, Jake stood up and addressed the room as if Marcus was not even there. "Boys, we all know what needs to happen here," Jake announced, his voice booming through the small meeting room. "We need real leadership, not some pencil pusher who's afraid to get his hands dirty. I say we go to management and tell them we want a real foreman, someone who understands mining." The room erupted in agreement. Men who had never spoken directly to Marcus about their concerns were suddenly vocal about their dissatisfaction. They complained about his lack of practical experience, his soft appearance, and his academic approach to problems that required physical solutions. Marcus sat at the front of the room, his face burning with embarrassment as his authority crumbled before his eyes. "You want to prove you belong here?" Jake continued, stepping closer to Marcus with a cruel smile. "There's a section of the mine that's been marked dangerous for months. Tunnel 7 has unstable rock formations and gas leaks that our equipment can't properly measure. Real miners would find a way to make it productive, but it's been sitting empty because the safety reports say it's too risky." Marcus knew Tunnel 7 well. The geological surveys showed serious structural problems, and gas detectors had registered dangerous levels of methane in several areas. According to every safety protocol he had studied, the tunnel should remain closed until proper reinforcement and ventilation systems could be installed. But as he looked around the room at the faces of his crew, he saw nothing but contempt and challenge. "If you want to lead us," Jake said, his voice growing louder, "then you need to show us you're willing to take the same risks we take every day. Go down to Tunnel 7 tomorrow morning, spend a full shift down there, inspect every inch of it, and come back with a plan to make it operational. Do that, and maybe we'll start listening to what you have to say." The other men joined in, their voices creating a chorus of agreement and encouragement. They saw this as the perfect test for their unwanted foreman. Either he would refuse and prove himself a coward, giving them grounds to demand his removal, or he would accept and likely face consequences that would remove him from their lives permanently. Marcus felt trapped between his knowledge of the dangers and his desperate need to gain respect from his crew. He thought about his wife Sarah and their 2 teenage children at home. He considered the promotion he had worked so hard to achieve and the financial security it provided his family. But most of all, he thought about the daily humiliation he endured and how it was affecting not just his work performance but his self-respect. Standing up slowly, Marcus looked each man in the eye before speaking. His voice was quiet but steady as he made the decision that would change everything. "Fine," he said simply. "I'll go to Tunnel 7 tomorrow morning. I'll inspect every section and develop a plan for safe operation. But when I come back with results, I expect this crew to follow my leadership without question." Jake grinned widely and extended his massive hand. "Deal, college boy. But don't expect us to come looking for you if you don't make it back." The room filled with laughter as Marcus shook Jake's hand, sealing an agreement that everyone assumed would end his career at Blackstone Mining Company. Marcus spent that entire night poring over geological surveys, safety reports, and structural analysis documents for Tunnel 7. His home office was scattered with papers, blueprints, and technical manuals as he tried to understand every possible danger he might face. Sarah found him at 3 in the morning, still studying by lamplight with empty coffee cups surrounding his desk. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Those men are bullies and they're asking you to risk your life just to prove a point. No job is worth dying for." Marcus looked up at his wife, seeing the worry in her eyes. He had not told her about the daily humiliation he faced at work, but she could see how it was affecting him. His confidence had been slowly eroding for months, and he was becoming a different person at home. Their children had even asked why Daddy seemed so sad all the time. "I've tried everything else," Marcus replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I've studied every manual, followed every procedure, and tried to be fair and reasonable. But they see me as weak, and maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just a college boy who doesn't belong in their world." Sarah sat down next to him and picked up one of the geological reports. Even without technical training, she could see the red markings and warning symbols scattered throughout the document. "This says the tunnel is extremely dangerous. Gas leaks, unstable rock formations, inadequate ventilation. Marcus, this isn't about proving your worth. This is about survival." Marcus knew his wife was right, but he also knew that backing down now would mean losing any chance of ever leading his crew effectively. Word would spread throughout the mining company that he had been challenged and had refused to act. His career would be over, and his family's financial security would disappear. The next morning arrived gray and cold, with a light snow falling across the mining site. Marcus packed his safety gear carefully, double-checking every piece of equipment. He brought extra gas detectors, emergency oxygen, communication devices, and structural monitoring tools. If he was going into Tunnel 7, he would be as prepared as possible. When he arrived at the mine entrance, he found Jake and several other crew members waiting for him. They had obviously spread word about the challenge, and now they wanted to witness whether their foreman would actually follow through with his promise. Jake was leaning against the tunnel entrance with his arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Well, well," Jake called out as Marcus approached. "Look who actually showed up. I half expected you to call in sick today, college boy. You sure you don't want to change your mind? There's no shame in admitting you're not cut out for real mining work." Marcus ignored Jake's taunts and began checking his equipment one final time. The gas detector was functioning properly, the communication radio was charged and working, and his emergency oxygen supply was full. He had studied the tunnel maps until he could navigate them from memory, and he carried backup copies in waterproof containers. "I'll be back before the end of shift," Marcus announced to the gathered crowd. "When I return, I expect everyone to be ready to discuss the operational plan I'll be developing down there." The men exchanged glances and chuckled among themselves. They clearly expected this to be the last conversation they would have with Marcus Thompson as their foreman. Some seemed excited about the prospect of getting a new supervisor, while others appeared slightly uncomfortable with what they had pressured him into doing. Marcus entered Tunnel 7 alone, his helmet light cutting through the darkness ahead. The air felt different immediately, heavier and more oppressive than the main mining tunnels. His gas detector began beeping within the first 100 yards, indicating elevated methane levels that made every step potentially dangerous. The tunnel walls showed obvious signs of stress, with small rocks occasionally falling from the ceiling as he walked deeper underground. As he moved further into the tunnel, Marcus documented everything he observed. The structural problems were even worse than the reports had indicated. Support beams showed stress fractures, and several sections of the tunnel appeared ready to collapse with minimal disturbance. The ventilation system was completely inadequate, allowing dangerous gases to accumulate in pockets throughout the tunnel network. 3 hours into his inspection, Marcus was examining a particularly unstable section when his gas detector began screaming warnings. The methane levels had spiked dramatically, creating an immediate explosion risk. He turned to retreat towards safer air, but his movement triggered something that changed everything. The tunnel floor beneath him suddenly gave way, not from a collapse but from what appeared to be a hidden cavity that had been concealed by a thin layer of rock and debris. Marcus fell through the opening, dropping nearly 20 feet into a space that should not have existed according to any mining survey or geological report. When he hit the bottom, his helmet light went out, and his communication radio was damaged in the fall. Marcus found himself in complete darkness in an underground chamber that was not marked on any official mine map. As his eyes slowly adjusted, he realized he was not alone in this hidden space. Strange rock formations glowed with a faint, unnatural light, and the air hummed with an energy he could not identify or understand. Marcus tried to climb back up to the tunnel, but the walls of the cavity were smooth and offered no handholds. His emergency supplies were scattered from the fall, and his gas detector was making sounds he had never heard before. Whatever this place was, it operated according to rules that his geological training had never prepared him to understand. As panic began to set in, Marcus noticed that the glowing rock seemed to respond to his presence, pulsing brighter when he moved closer and dimming when he stepped away. The energy in the air made his skin tingle, and he began to feel changes in his body that he could not explain. His vision became sharper even in the dim light, his hearing more acute, and his physical strength seemed to be increasing with each passing minute. Hours passed in the strange underground chamber as Marcus tried to understand what was happening to him. The glowing crystals embedded in the cave walls pulsed with increasing intensity, and the energy they emitted seemed to be changing his body at a cellular level. His muscles, which had always been soft from years of desk work, began to feel harder and more defined. His eyesight, which had required thick glasses since childhood, became sharp enough to see clearly in near total darkness. The transformation was not just physical. Marcus found his mind working differently, processing information faster and making connections he had never been able to make before. The geological knowledge he had studied for years suddenly made perfect sense in ways that textbooks had never explained. He could sense the structure of the rock formations around him, understanding how they had formed over millions of years and what forces were still shaping them. When Marcus touched the glowing crystals, visions flashed through his mind, showing him the history of this place. The chamber was part of an ancient cave system that had been sealed off during the original mining operations decades ago. The company had discovered the strange crystals and their unusual properties, but instead of studying them properly, they had classified the area as dangerous and hidden it from public knowledge. The crystals contained a rare mineral formation that existed nowhere else on Earth. When exposed to human contact, they released energy that enhanced physical and mental capabilities far beyond normal human limits. The mining company's early executives had used small amounts of this mineral to gain advantages in business and personal life, but they had kept its existence secret to maintain their monopoly on its power. Marcus realized that his fall into this chamber was not an accident. The tunnel floor had been deliberately weakened to create a trap for anyone who got too close to. Discovering the truth about Tunnel 7, the mining company had been using dangerous assignments like his as a way to eliminate employees who asked too many questions or threatened to expose their secrets. As the hours turned into a full day, Marcus felt his transformation becoming complete. His body had grown several inches taller and gained significant muscle mass. His mind could process complex calculations instantly, and he could sense things about his environment that normal human senses could never detect. The fear and uncertainty he had felt throughout his career were replaced by absolute confidence and a clear understanding of his true capabilities. When Marcus finally found a way to climb out of the chamber using his enhanced strength and agility, he discovered that the mining crew had not even begun to look for him. Jake and the other workers had simply assumed he was dead and had already begun discussing who should replace him as foreman. They had even started celebrating what they saw as their victory over the weak college boy who had finally been removed from their lives. The first person to see Marcus emerge from Tunnel 7 was Tommy Rodriguez, a young miner who had always been neutral in the conflicts with the crew. Tommy's jaw dropped when he saw the figure walking out of the supposedly deadly tunnel. The man looked like Marcus Thompson, but everything about him was different. He stood taller, moved with fluid confidence, and his eyes seemed to glow with an inner light that was both fascinating and intimidating. "Mr. Thompson," Tommy called out uncertainly. "Is that really you? We thought Everyone said you were probably dead down there. You've been gone for over 30 hours. Marcus smiled, but it was a different kind of smile than Tommy had ever seen from the former foreman. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets that others could not imagine and had power that others could not understand. I'm very much alive, Tommy, and I've learned some very interesting things about this mine that I think everyone should know. Word spread quickly through the mining site that Marcus had returned from Tunnel 7, but the man who came back was clearly not the same person who had gone in. Workers gathered in small groups, whispering about the dramatic changes in his appearance and demeanor. Some were curious, others were frightened, but everyone was talking about the transformation of their formerly weak and ineffective foreman. Jake Morrison was in the equipment shed when he heard the news. His initial reaction was disbelief, followed by anger that his plan to get rid of Marcus had failed. He stormed out of the shed with several of his closest supporters, determined to confront whatever version of Marcus Thompson had emerged from the tunnel. Well, Jake called out as he approached Marcus, trying to maintain his usual intimidating presence. Look what crawled out of the hole. I got to admit, college boy, I didn't think you had it in you to spend even 1 hour down there, let alone survive a whole day and night. Marcus turned to face Jake, and everyone present could immediately see that the power dynamic had fundamentally changed. Marcus no longer looked up at Jake because he was now tall enough to meet him eye to eye. His shoulders were broader, his stance more confident, and his presence commanded attention in a way that his college education never had. Actually, Jake, Marcus replied, his voice deeper and more authoritative than anyone remembered. I spent my time down there very productively. I discovered some fascinating things about Tunnel 7 that I think you and the company executives will find very interesting. Things that explain why certain areas of this mine have always been off limits, and why the safety reports never quite tell the whole story. The crowd of workers sensed tension building between the two men, but this time it felt different. Jake was still physically imposing, but Marcus now carried himself with a confidence that made Jake's intimidation tactics seem hollow and outdated. The other workers began to realize they were witnessing a confrontation that would determine not just who led their crew, but who controlled access to secrets that could change everything about their work and their lives. Jake stepped closer, trying to use his proximity to intimidate Marcus as he had done countless times before. But when he looked into Marcus's eyes, he saw something that made him take an involuntary step backward. The man standing before him was no longer the weak, uncertain college graduate who had been afraid of his own shadow. This was someone who had been fundamentally changed by forces that Jake could not understand or control. The confrontation between Marcus and Jake drew the attention of every worker on the mining site. Men who had been doing their jobs just minutes earlier now gathered in a large circle around the two men, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The atmosphere was electric with tension as Jake tried to maintain his position as the unofficial leader of the crew. I don't care what you think you learned down there, Jake growled, clenching his massive fists. You're still the same weak little man who's been hiding behind safety manuals and company policies. One day in a dangerous tunnel doesn't make you a real miner, and it sure doesn't make you worthy of leading this crew. Marcus stood perfectly still, his enhanced senses allowing him to read Jake's body language and emotional state with perfect clarity. He could see the fear hidden beneath Jake's aggressive posture, the uncertainty that came from facing something he did not understand. The other workers were also afraid, but their fear was mixed with curiosity about what had happened to their former weakling of a foreman. You're right about one thing, Jake, Marcus replied calmly. I'm not the same man who went into that tunnel yesterday, but that doesn't mean I'm weaker. It means I'm finally strong enough to show you what real leadership looks like. Without warning, Marcus reached out and grabbed Jake's wrist as the larger man tried to throw a punch. The crowd gasped as they watched Marcus effortlessly stop Jake's attack with one hand. Jake's eyes widened in shock as he realized that his full strength was being held in check by someone who should not have been able to resist him at all. Let me show you something interesting about Tunnel 7, Marcus continued, still holding Jake's wrist without any apparent effort. The geological reports that marked it as dangerous were only telling part of the truth. Yes, there are unstable rock formations and gas leaks, but there's also something else down there that the company has been hiding from us for decades. Marcus released Jake's wrist and walked over to a pile of mining equipment. He picked up a solid steel crowbar that normally required two men to lift comfortably. The workers watched in amazement as Marcus bent the steel tool into a perfect circle, using just his bare hands, the metal bending like soft clay under his enhanced strength. The crystal formations in that tunnel emit energy that can enhance human capabilities far beyond normal limits, Marcus explained as he shaped the steel. The company discovered this decades ago. But instead of sharing the benefits with the workers who risk their lives every day, they've been keeping it secret and using it for their own advantage. Jake stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. The display of strength was impossible according to everything he understood about human limitations. The other workers were equally stunned, whispering among themselves as they tried to process what they were witnessing. "That's impossible," Jake stammered. "People don't just get stronger overnight. This has to be some kind of trick or illusion." Marcus smiled and tossed the bent crowbar to Jake, who barely managed to catch it with both hands. The weight was exactly what it should be, and the metal was genuinely bent in ways that no normal human could achieve. There was no trickery involved, just a demonstration of capabilities that challenged everything the workers thought they knew about human potential. The company executives have been using small amounts of this mineral enhancement for years, Marcus continued. That's how they've been able to make decisions so quickly, work such long hours, and maintain their competitive advantage in the mining industry. Meanwhile, they've been sending workers like me into dangerous situations, hoping we would either be killed or scared away before we could discover their secret. Tommy Rodriguez stepped forward from the crowd, his young face showing confusion and concern. "Mr. Thompson, are you saying the company has been deliberately putting us in danger to protect some kind of secret mineral deposit?" Marcus nodded, his enhanced intelligence allowing him to piece together information that had been hidden for decades. The safety violations, the accidents that have killed miners over the years, the areas that are always marked as off-limits. They've all been part of a systematic cover-up to keep this discovery secret while the executives use it to enhance their own abilities. The implications of Marcus's revelations began to sink in among the workers. If what he was saying was true, then their dangerous working conditions were not just the result of corporate negligence, but part of a deliberate conspiracy to keep them away from something that could change their lives. Jake looked around at the faces of his fellow workers and realized that the dynamic of the group was shifting dramatically. The men who had followed his lead in mocking and challenging Marcus were now looking at their transformed foreman with a mixture of awe and growing respect. The display of strength had proven that Marcus was no longer someone who could be intimidated or dismissed. "Even if what you're saying is true," Jake said desperately, "it doesn't change the fact that you don't belong here. You're still just a college boy who got lucky and found something weird in a tunnel. Real mining work takes years of experience, not some magical enhancement." Marcus walked over to a massive piece of mining equipment that had been sitting broken for weeks because it was too heavy for the regular crew to move and repair. The machine weighed several tons and normally required a crane or multiple workers with specialized equipment to relocate. The workers watched in stunned silence as Marcus lifted one end of the machine by himself and effortlessly moved it to a better position. "Experience is valuable, Jake," Marcus said as he set the equipment down without any sign of strain. "But it's not the only thing that matters. Intelligence, vision, and the ability to protect the people under your command are equally important. For the first time since I became foreman, I finally have all of those qualities." The crowd of workers began to murmur with excitement and anticipation. They were witnessing the birth of a leader who combined intellectual knowledge with physical capabilities that seemed almost superhuman. More importantly, they were learning that their workplace contained secrets that could potentially transform all of their lives if they could gain access to the same enhancements that Marcus had received. The news of Marcus's transformation and his revelations about the hidden crystal chamber spread beyond the mining crew within hours. Word reached the company executives by the end of the day, and emergency meetings were called at the corporate headquarters. The carefully guarded secret that had given Blackstone Mining Company its competitive advantage for decades was now known by someone who could not be easily controlled or eliminated. Richard Blackstone, the company's CEO and grandson of the founder, sat in his luxurious office reviewing security reports about the situation. He had been using small doses of the crystal mineral for 20 years, which explained his seemingly superhuman ability to work 18-hour days, make complex business decisions instantly, and maintain a physical fitness level that impressed men half his age. "How much does Thompson know?" Blackstone asked his security chief, a former military officer named Colonel Hayes, who had also been enhanced by the crystal mineral. Based on our surveillance, he appears to have discovered the main chamber and been exposed to significant levels of the enhancement energy, Hayes replied. His physical and mental capabilities have increased dramatically, and he's shared information about the cover-up with the entire mining crew. The situation is no longer containable through normal means. Blackstone stood up and walked to the window overlooking the mining operation. He could see groups of workers gathered in intense discussion, their body language showing excitement and determination rather than the usual resignation and compliance. The workforce was becoming organized and empowered in ways that threatened the company's ability to maintain control over its most valuable secret. We need to act quickly, Blackstone decided. If word of the crystal mineral spreads beyond our workforce, we'll face government investigations, competitor infiltration, and public demands for access to the enhancement. Our entire business model depends on maintaining exclusive control over this resource. Meanwhile, at the mining site, Marcus was organizing the workers in ways they had never experienced before. His enhanced intelligence allowed him to understand each person's individual strengths and concerns, and he began developing plans that would benefit everyone while exposing the company's decades of deception and exploitation. The crystal chamber I discovered is just one of several hidden deposits throughout this mine, Marcus explained to the assembled workers. The company has been extracting small amounts for their own use while telling us these areas are too dangerous to explore. They've been stealing our potential while putting our lives at risk to protect their secrets. Tommy Rodriguez raised his hand with a question that was on everyone's mind. Mr. Thompson, if these crystals can make people stronger and smarter like they did for you, shouldn't all of us have access to them? I mean, we're the ones doing the dangerous work down there every day. Marcus nodded, pleased that Tommy was thinking through the implications. That's exactly right. The enhancements don't just make individuals stronger, they make teams more effective, work safer, and communities more prosperous. The company has been hoarding this resource for personal gain, while keeping the workers who generate their wealth in dangerous and limiting conditions. Jake Morrison had been listening from the edge of the group, his earlier hostility replaced by confusion and grudging respect. The man he had mocked and challenged was now displaying leadership qualities that Jake had never seen before. More importantly, Marcus was talking about sharing power rather than hoarding it, which was completely different from how Jake had always understood leadership to work. What exactly are you proposing we do about this? Jake asked, stepping forward. Even if everything you're saying is true, the company owns this mine and employs all of us. They have security, lawyers, and government connections. We're just workers. Marcus smiled, and his enhanced mind was already several steps ahead of the obvious challenges. We're not just workers anymore, Jake. We're people who know the truth about a resource that could change the world. And thanks to my enhancement, I now understand exactly how the company has been using their legal and political connections to maintain their monopoly. Over the next several hours, Marcus shared detailed information about the company's operations that he had never had access to as a regular foreman. His enhanced mental capabilities allowed him to piece together financial records, safety reports, and government filings in ways that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. The workers learned that their employer had been systematically violating safety regulations, hiding environmental damage, and bribing officials to maintain access to the crystal deposits. As word of the situation spread to other shifts and departments, the entire mining operation began to organize around Marcus's leadership. Workers who had never spoken to each other were now collaborating on plans to document the company's crimes and secure access to the enhancements that could improve all of their lives. But the company was not going to allow their secret to be exposed without a fight. That evening, security teams began arriving at the mining site with equipment and personnel that seemed far beyond what would be necessary for normal workplace disputes. The workers realized they were facing opponents who had been enhanced by the same crystal energy that had transformed Marcus, but who were using their abilities to maintain power rather than share it. Colonel Hayes led a team of enhanced security operatives onto the mining site just as the night shift was beginning. These men moved with the same fluid confidence and superhuman capabilities that Marcus had displayed, but their intentions were clearly hostile. They were not there to negotiate or investigate. They were there to eliminate the threat to the company's control over the crystal mineral. "Attention workers," Hayes announced through a portable sound system. "By order of Blackstone Mining Company management, this facility is now under emergency security protocols. All personnel are to return to their homes immediately and report for individual interviews tomorrow morning. Anyone who refuses to comply will be considered a security threat and handled accordingly." The workers looked to Marcus for guidance, sensing that this confrontation would determine whether they would gain access to the life-changing enhancements or continue to be exploited by a company that had been stealing their potential for decades. Marcus stepped forward to face the security team, his enhanced senses telling him that these men were prepared to use lethal force to protect the company's secrets. "We're not going anywhere," Marcus announced clearly. "These workers have a right to know about the resources they've been risking their lives to extract. And they have a right to benefit from discoveries that could improve their lives and their families' futures." Colonel Hayes smiled coldly and gestured to his team. "Mr. Thompson, you've caused quite a disturbance with your little adventure in Tunnel 7, but you're about to learn that some secrets are worth killing to protect." The confrontation between Marcus and Colonel Hayes' security team created a tense standoff that could explode into violence at any moment. The enhanced security operatives moved with predatory grace, positioning themselves to control key areas of the mining site while the workers huddled together, uncertain about their ability to resist opponents with superhuman capabilities. Marcus could sense the fear and desperation in his fellow workers, but he could also feel their determination to finally gain access to the opportunities that had been stolen from them for decades. His enhanced mental abilities allowed him to assess the tactical situation quickly and develop a strategy that could protect his people while exposing the company's crimes to the outside world. "Tommy," Marcus called out quietly to the young miner, who had shown the most curiosity about the situation. "Do you still have that camera phone you used to take pictures of safety violations?" Tommy nodded nervously, pulling out his smartphone. "Yes, sir. I've been documenting problems for months, but the company never responds to our reports." Marcus smiled grimly. "They're about to respond in ways that will prove everything we've been saying about their willingness to harm workers who threaten their secrets. Start recording everything that happens here tonight. Make sure you capture it in a way that can be transmitted to news media and government agencies." While Tommy began documenting the confrontation, Marcus addressed Colonel Hayes directly. "Before this goes any further, I want you to know that everything we've discovered about the crystal mineral and the company's cover-up has already been documented and shared with people outside this mining site. Harming us won't stop the information from becoming public." Hayes laughed, but his enhanced senses told him that Marcus was not bluffing. "You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be, Thompson. The company is prepared to offer you a very generous settlement to forget everything you've seen and relocate your family to another state. You could live comfortably for the rest of your life without ever having to work again." The offer was tempting, and Marcus could see some of the workers looking at him with hope that he might accept a deal that would end the dangerous confrontation. But his enhanced intelligence allowed him to see the long-term consequences of accepting such an arrangement. The company would continue exploiting workers, hiding environmental damage, and hoarding resources that could benefit humanity. "The problem with your offer," Marcus replied, "is that it only helps one person while leaving everyone else in the same dangerous and limiting situation they've always faced. Real leadership means protecting all of your people, not just securing advantages for yourself." Jake Morrison, who had been listening from the edge of the group, stepped forward with an expression of newfound respect for Marcus. "You know what, college boy? You're finally making sense. These company men have been treating us like disposable equipment for years, and now we find out they've been stealing opportunities that could change our lives and our children's futures." Other workers began voicing their agreement, and Hayes realized that the situation was not going to be resolved through intimidation or bribery. His team of enhanced operatives began moving into more aggressive positions, preparing for a confrontation that could result in multiple casualties. "This is your final warning," Hayes announced. "Disperse immediately, or we will be forced to use necessary measures to protect company property and classified information." Marcus knew that necessary measures meant violence that could seriously injure or kill the workers who had trusted him to lead them toward a better future. His enhanced physical capabilities made him confident about his own ability to survive a fight with the security team, but he could not protect everyone simultaneously. That was when an unexpected ally arrived on the scene. Sarah Thompson, Marcus's wife, appeared at the mining site with a group of family members and community supporters who had been following the developing situation through social media posts and local news reports. Tommy's documentation efforts had already begun spreading beyond the immediate area. "Marcus," Sarah called out as she approached the confrontation. "The story is already on the internet. People are sharing videos and demanding investigations. The company can't cover this up anymore." Hayes's expression darkened as he realized that the situation had expanded beyond what could be controlled through localized intimidation. His communication device crackled with urgent messages from company headquarters as executives scrambled to respond to growing public attention and media inquiries. "Ma'am, you need to leave this area immediately," Hayes warned Sarah. "This is a private workplace dispute that doesn't concern civilians." Sarah stood her ground, positioning herself between the security team and her husband. "This concerns every person in this community whose family members work in dangerous conditions while the company hides resources that could make their jobs safer and more rewarding. My husband risked his life to discover the truth, and we're not going to let you silence him." The arrival of family members and community supporters changed the dynamics of the confrontation significantly. Hayes and his team were prepared to handle resistant workers, but attacking civilians in front of cameras would create a public relations disaster that could destroy the company's ability to maintain its cover-up. Marcus seized the opportunity to address the growing crowd. "Everyone here tonight is witnessing something historic. For decades, Blackstone Mining Company has been hiding discoveries that could enhance human capabilities and improve lives around the world. They've been using these resources for their own advantage, while putting workers in dangerous situations to protect their secrets." As Marcus spoke, his enhanced voice carried clearly across the mining site, and Tommy's camera captured everything for immediate transmission to social media platforms and news organizations. The company's carefully maintained secrecy was crumbling in real time as the truth spread beyond their ability to control or contain it. Colonel Hayes received an urgent communication through his earpiece and stepped away from the immediate confrontation to consult with his superiors. When he returned, his aggressive posture had been replaced by tactical retreat. The company had decided that direct confrontation would cause more damage than allowing the situation to play out through legal and political channels. "This matter will be resolved through appropriate legal procedures," Hayes announced to the crowd. "Blackstone Mining Company will cooperate fully with any official investigations while protecting its legitimate business interests and intellectual property rights." The security team began withdrawing from the mining site, but everyone present understood that this was far from over. The company would use every resource at their disposal to minimize the damage and maintain control over the crystal mineral deposits. But for the first time in decades, workers and community members had hoped that the truth would finally be exposed and that the benefits of the discovery would be shared rather than hoarded. 3 months after the confrontation at the mining site, the world had fundamentally changed. The story of Marcus Thompson's transformation and the discovery of the enhancement crystals had become international news, sparking investigations by multiple government agencies and inspiring scientific research projects around the globe. What had started as workplace bullying had evolved into one of the most significant discoveries in human history. Marcus stood in a modern laboratory facility that had been built on the former mining site, watching as teams of scientists from universities and research institutions studied the crystal formations under carefully controlled conditions. The enhancement effects were real and reproducible, but proper research had revealed that the process needed to be managed safely to avoid negative side effects that the company had been hiding for years. The legal battles with Blackstone Mining Company had been swift and decisive. Federal investigators had uncovered decades of safety violations, environmental damage, and evidence of the systematic cover-up that Marcus had exposed. Richard Blackstone and several other executives were facing criminal charges, while the company's assets were being redistributed to the workers and communities that had been harmed by their actions. Jake Morrison approached Marcus with a tablet computer containing the latest reports from the research teams. The former antagonist had become one of Marcus's most trusted assistants. his practical mining experience proving invaluable as they worked to safely extract and study the crystal mineral deposits. The latest batch of test subjects is showing remarkable results, Jake reported with enthusiasm. Enhanced strength, improved cognitive function, and better coordination, all without the dangerous side effects we were worried about. The controlled exposure process you developed is working perfectly. Marcus nodded with satisfaction. His enhanced intelligence had allowed him to design safety protocols that prevented the painful transformation he had experienced while still providing the benefits of the crystal enhancement. Workers could now improve their capabilities gradually and safely, with medical supervision and psychological support throughout the process. Tommy Rodriguez had become the facility's chief documentation specialist, using his skills with cameras and social media to share the research progress with the public. The transparency that had started with his smartphone recordings during the confrontation had evolved into a comprehensive communication strategy that kept the global community informed about every aspect of the project. Mr. Thompson, Tommy called out as he approached with his ever-present camera. The news team from the International Science Network wants to interview you about the latest developments. They're particularly interested in how the enhancement process is being made available to communities around the world. Marcus had given hundreds of interviews over the past months, but he never grew tired of sharing the story of how worker solidarity and courage had overcome corporate greed and secrecy. The transformation he had undergone was not just physical and mental, but moral and social as well. He had learned that true leadership meant empowering others rather than hoarding advantages. The enhancement facility now employed most of the former Blackstone mining workers, along with hundreds of scientists, technicians, and support staff from around the world. The crystals were being carefully harvested and processed to create enhancement treatments that were being distributed to medical facilities, research institutions, and community centers globally. Sarah Thompson had become the facility's community liaison, helping families understand the enhancement process and ensuring that the benefits were shared equitably across different economic and social groups. The technology that had once been hoarded by wealthy executives was now being used to improve lives in impoverished communities, dangerous professions, and challenging environments worldwide. The most amazing thing, Sarah told the news interviewer later that day, is seeing how the enhancements affect not just individual capabilities, but how people relate to each other. Enhanced empathy, improved communication skills, and greater capacity for cooperation. It's like watching humanity evolve in real time. Marcus often thought about the irony of his situation. The men who had mocked him and sent him into danger, hoping to remove him from their lives, had actually pushed him toward the discovery that would transform all of their lives. Jake Morrison in particular had become a close friend and trusted colleague, their former conflicts replaced by mutual respect and shared purpose. "You know what's funny?" Jake said to Marcus as they watched the sunset from the facility's observation deck. "I spent years thinking that strength meant intimidating people and hoarding power for yourself. But watching what you've done with your enhancements, I realized that real strength comes from lifting other people up and sharing opportunities." Marcus smiled, remembering the frightened and uncertain man he had been just months earlier. The physical and mental enhancements had been remarkable, but the most important transformation had been learning to believe in himself and trust in the loyalty of people who had once seemed like enemies. The facility's success had inspired similar projects around the world, as other companies and governments began searching for their own crystal deposits and developing their own enhancement programs. But Marcus had insisted that all research and development be conducted transparently, with benefits shared openly rather than hoarded for competitive advantage. As evening fell over the facility, Marcus walked through the residential areas where workers and their families lived in comfortable homes that had been built with enhanced construction techniques and powered by clean energy systems developed through crystal-enhanced research. Children played in safe parks while their parents worked on projects that were improving lives. Around the world, the story that had begun with mockery and attempted humiliation had become one of hope and human potential. Marcus Thompson, the weak college boy who had been sent to his death by cruel coworkers, had returned as a leader who proved that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from empowering them to achieve their own greatness. Standing in the middle of the thriving community that had grown around the enhancement facility, Marcus realized that his greatest transformation had not been physical or mental, but spiritual. He had learned that every person contains unlimited potential, and that the greatest achievements come from helping others discover and develop their own hidden capabilities. The man who had once been mocked for his weakness had become a symbol of how courage, intelligence, and compassion could overcome any challenge and transform any community. And every day, as more people experienced their own enhancements and began contributing to the growing global network of enhanced communities, Marcus knew that the best was yet to come.